Hello and welcome to Catalyze Music Academy. My name is Zach Chrysler and I am an Ableton certified trainer. This is going to be the very first in a series of weekly YouTube tip and trick tutorial videos that I will be releasing. So if you're interested in seeing more about what we do, please subscribe to the channel. But today I want to talk about a topic that is very near and dear to my heart, which is going to be bass sound design. And this is something I get asked about all the time. So I want to take a look at a specific way to do some cool, interesting, growly, textural bass sound design that can be used a lot in dubstep or any kind of aggressive style electronic music. So there's gonna be a lot of different ways you can do this, but this is a technique that's been coming up for me quite a bit, and it's been really, really helpful to just get some nice, interesting sounds without you doing a lot of work. So let's check it out. Growly bass sound design. How do you do it? How do you make it sound cool? How do you make it sound interesting and have a lot of that nice kind of texture to it? And a lot of people think that it has to be really complicated. A lot of people think that you have to have really crazy oscillators with lots of automation and lots of really complicated synthesis going on. So I want to show you a really basic way to get a nice textural growly sound without having to do a whole lot of work. So to start off, I have a couple tracks here. I got a drum loop, a percussive group, and some examples we'll take a look at later on. And then I've got just an empty MIDI track, nothing on it except for a 4-bar loop with just F notes, F0 notes for half a bar at a time. And I'm sitting at 140 BPM. So to start off, you can use almost any synthesizer you want for this. You can use, I recommend using either operator or wavetable, but you can use Serum, you can use any plugin, it doesn't matter. As long as it can do the basic waveforms, saw waves, square waves, you should be totally fine. I'm personally gonna be using operator, but have fun with whatever synthesizer you like using the best. So to start off, we're gonna be using a saw wave, although square waves can also work really well, but totally up to you. So just a saw wave with the MIDI notes we have will sound like this. Pretty basic, pretty boring. So we're gonna take this idea and we're gonna turn on our filter and take out a lot of those high frequencies. And if we turn on our LFO here, first off, you wanna make sure if you're using operator, make sure that these buttons are not turned on. This is gonna control the pitch of your oscillators, and that's not what you want. And you want to make sure this filter button is turned on. So now, if I set this to be in sync, this is going to move our filter frequency up and down and give it that kind of wobbly sound that sounds like that. So this is a very kind of classic old school way of making dubstep wobbly sounds. But we want to try something a little different. So what we're going to do is we're going to, instead of using our low pass filter, we're going to be using the band pass filter. So this is going to both cut out the low frequencies and the high frequencies and leave us with this little area in the middle, which right now sounds like that. We can start moving our filter frequency up and down. To get all kinds of different textures with it. We can also change the amount to change how far it goes in either direction. I'm going to keep it right around here. I'm also going to give it a little bit more resonance, so it's going to add a little bit of that spike there. Not that much. So right there. That's pretty much all the synthesis we're going to be doing. We could switch up things a little bit later on, but that's it. Most of the heavy lifting for this kind of sound design is going to be done specifically with our audio effects. So I'm going to show you a handful of the audio effects that I think work the best for this kind of sound design, but don't feel limited to just these effects. Use whatever effects you want. So to start off, we're going to be using the Redo or Redux, depending on who you talk to. I've heard it pronounced both ways. I'm not actually sure which way you're supposed to pronounce it. Specifically the downsample mode. So there's two options here, either soft or hard. They're the exact same setting, except for soft goes from 1 to 20 and hard goes from 1 to 200. I'm going to use the hard mode specifically because I kind of like it in the 20 to 30 range. But what this is going to do is going to reduce your sample rate. Which is going to add this very digital style distortion. You'll hear it as I turn this up. So right in the the 20s and mid 30s, I think sounds really good. It adds this nice kind of digital vowel sound to it. If you go too much beyond 30s, it just sounds a little too distorted. So I'm not really into that. So right in this area, I think works really well. So that's going to be step one. This is optional. You don't necessarily have to use this. This is just a really cool, interesting textural way to add distortion. There are lots of different ways to add distortion though, so I generally would recommend checking out things like the pedal or the overdrive, as well as amp. Those are all going to be excellent go-tos, as well as the saturator. Saturator is another really good one for this kind of thing. So I'm going to use pedal for right now, although I might switch this up later on. I might even, in a lot of situations, use multiple different kinds of distortion all stacked on top of each other. So I'm going to use pedal specifically in the fuzz mode because I think fuzz sounds the best, with the sub turned on. And then I'm going to take the dry wet and start toning this down a little bit, specifically because if it's too much, it just kind of comes a little bit muddy and a little too distorted. So I'm going to tone this down so I get a little bit of distortion there. That actually reminds me, specifically when we're dealing with the Redux here, there's no dry wet control. I can control the amount that I'm getting by controlling the downsample control here, but I can't control the mix of dry signal and wet signal. So if you're in a situation like this, what you could do is hit Command G, Control G, to put it inside of a rack, open up your chain area, and add an empty chain. So now I have one chain that has our distortion on it, and one chain that's dry, and we can use these volumes to get different amounts of our distorted signal. So if I want to tone this down, I get less signal, therefore less distortion. So I can mix and match and get exactly the right amount, while also getting the right kind of distortion depending on how I have my downsample set. So we'll keep it in those kind of upper 20s there. So we'll turn our pedal back on. Maybe lessen the pedal. Also, things like amp, really, really excellent. Amp is going to be really extreme unless you turn the dry wet way down. If you're going for really extreme, if that's something you're really into, just setting to the different modes, specifically like rock, lead, and heavy, I think sound really good for this kind of thing if you turn the dry wet way down. We'll keep it on rock right now. So mix and match any amount of distortion you want, go crazy with it, have fun with it. The other kinds of effects that I think can be really interesting are effects like the chorus, the flanger, as well as the phaser, especially the phaser. Phaser is perfect for this kind of sound. So if we toss a phaser on here, the main thing we're going to take a look at is our XY controller, where we have frequency on our x-axis and feedback on our y-axis. And I'm just going to move this around until I think it sounds cool. But you can already hear it gives it also that nice kind of like vocally vowel-y kind of sound, depending on where I set this. So maybe tone down the dry wet a little bit. There's also this really handy LFO right here. This will move your frequency up and down like that, which can sound really cool. Something like that. And then let's also toss on a little bit of flanger. Too much flanger, and it has that like big pitchy kind of sound there. It's a little bit too much. So I'm going to tone this XY controller down a little bit. So I just get a little bit of it, and also tone down the dry wet quite a bit. And then lastly, let's check out the chorus. Works really great. This is really going to widen things up a bit. Make it sound a little kind of scratchy. There's this sweet spot in this modulation area here. Right in this area I think works really well. I also really like my dry wet right around 50%, maybe a little bit below, maybe a bit above. If you go too far low or too far high, it tends to not really work as well. So something like that might be our starting point. But again, feel free to go nuts, toss lots of effects on here, have fun with it, see what happens. The main thing that we're trying to do here is basically start with a really basic sound that doesn't contain a lot of frequency information because we're using this bandpass filter. And then we're using all these other effects to add in extra interesting, weird, higher frequency information. Then what we're going to do to really bring out those higher frequencies is we're going to go to our Multiband Dynamics and check out our handy OTT. This is a really commonly used effect in a lot of different kinds of sound design, especially if you're going like really big, crunchy, extreme kind of sounds. This is a compressor that's basically going to take your highs, mids, and lows and squash them all down into this very similar volume range. So the idea here is that a lot of the like weird, interesting textures that we're adding with all of our different effects, this is going to help bring those out. And to really make this extreme, we're just going to add 3 of them in a row. Like that. Cool, so that's the basic concept here. Starting off real basic, not a lot of synthesis, adding a lot of textures with their different effects, in my case using a bunch of distortion, and then phaser, flanger, and chorus. Of course, I can mix and match these and see what it sounds like as I turn these on and off. As well as I tweak those settings. So there's no right or wrong way to have these effects set up. It's totally up to you. Tweak them till you get to your heart's content, till you get something that sounds cool. So once we've done that, I'm actually kind of liking that. The LFO here is really consistent, and I could automate this. I could change this and move this to be faster or slower. And again, we'll get lots of different kinds of noises that way. But I don't want it to be so predictable. I want it to be a little bit more organic and kind of flow from like one weird sound to the next. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to control click or right click on my filter frequency of my bandpass filter, show my automation here, and I'm just going to add in manually a bunch of weird automation just by double clicking around and seeing what happens. Maybe also adding in some curve in different places. So maybe I'll add some curve here by holding on Option, dragging that around. I can also use my like pre-built shapes by just right clicking and then kind of tweaking those shapes a little bit just to get some cool, kind of interesting, something like that. I'm not super concerned about how this sounds. There, something like that. Just giving you some nice, interesting kind of motion. So each time it happens, it sounds a little different, sounds a little more organic. And then we can test this out with our drum beat. And of course, we can continue to tweak our settings on our effects till we dial it in until it's just right. And if I really want to, if I want to get creative with it, I could actually turn my LFO back on and combine my LFO motion with my automation. So it's going to be moving up and down based on my automation, but also moving up and down based on the LFO. So that's the basic concept here. Starting off with our really basic synthesis using a bandpass filter. Just for the sake of example, let's try switching this up to a square wave, see how this sounds. Actually, I really like that. Sounds totally different. Stacking on a bunch of effects, kind of dialing in those effects we want, and then tossing 3 OTTs at the end, and then just giving this filter frequency a little bit of motion or movement, either by automating it or using an LFO or combining the two together. So that's the basic idea. Just to kind of show you some examples I made earlier using the same kind of idea. Here is, once again, operator with a saw wave, a little bit of automation on my bandpass. Once again, using distortion, phaser, chorus, same idea. But it sounds like that. And then here is another example, similar idea. Sounds really similar to the one we just made. It's got the square wave. It's got the combination of automation as well as the LFO. A little bit of distortion, phaser, more distortion, chorus, OTT. Sounds very similar to the one we just made. And then this one is the same basic idea, but I pitched it up a couple octaves. So I pitched it up 2 octaves, and then I added in some more kind of FM synthesis going on, so it sounds a little different. So combine all of these together, and I get like a kind of cool, interesting, growly bass line. Just by kind of having a call and response, where these two are our call, so having on the start of each bar, and this one being our response. like that. And I'm using basically the same combination of effects, using operator with all the effects we just talked about to create all the different sounds and create something that's nice and interesting and textural and has a nice emotion to it without having to spend a lot of time trying to develop a brand new sound from scratch. These are all kind of based off of the same techniques and the same effects, but yield me very different results depending on how I tweak the controls on each one of these effects. So try it out for yourself, have some fun with it, make some cool, interesting sounds. Hopefully that is useful knowledge for you guys. And then if you make something really cool that you like, you can Command A to select all these guys, Command G to put it in a rack, and I can call this my high pitch baseline, and then I can save that. So yeah, have some fun with it, save some presets, make your life really easy. Don't spend tons and tons of time with this. This would be like a really quick, very fluid, very just kind of like experiment, throw stuff against the wall, see what sticks, and see what you can come up with. Then you save it, and then you can reuse it and recycle it, and then tweak it a little bit each time you use it. So that's pretty much it. Hopefully that is useful information for you guys. Hopefully at least you got inspired to try out some new techniques. Please feel free to let me know how it goes in the comments below. I'm always really curious to see what's useful information for you guys and what isn't. I'm also always on the hunt for new topics for future videos. So if there's a certain topic that you want to know more about, please let me know and I will try to make a video about that topic. Again, thanks for watching. If you want to see more videos that we're going to be producing, please subscribe to the channel, and hopefully I'll see you again next week.